Special Counsel Jack Smith is telling Republicans, game on. In a letter just released from his attorneys to Congressman Jim Jordan and Senator Chuck Grassley, the chairs of the House and Senate Judiciary Committee, Jack Smith is offering to testify, but he wants to do so in a public hearing about the investigations he conducted. Jack Smith's attorneys writing this, quote, given the many mischaracterizations of Mr. Smith's investigation into President Trump's alleged mishandling of classified documents and his role in attempting to overturn the results of the 2020 election, Mr. Smith respectfully requests the opportunity to testify in open hearings before the House and Senate Judiciary Committees.
All right. So imagine being Donald Trump right now. You've spent years claiming witch hunt, saying the investigations are politically motivated, arguing that you did nothing wrong, and then Special Counsel Jack Smith drops a massive filing, hundreds of pages of evidence, witness testimony, audio recordings, documents, and it's not just evidence, it's nuclear level evidence. Literally, because some of what Smith revealed involves Trump sharing classified information about nuclear submarines, about warhead capabilities, about America's most sensitive military secrets. Can you believe this? The special counsel just laid out a case that includes Trump allegedly showing classified nuclear documents to people who had no security clearance, no need to know, no authorization to see that information, just Trump casually sharing America's nuclear secrets with whoever happened to be around. And that's just one piece of what Smith revealed. The filing is massive. It details Trump's attempts to overturn the 2020 election. It shows evidence of obstruction of justice. It reveals efforts to delete security footage from Mar-a-Lago after a subpoena was issued. And most devastating of all, it includes testimony from Trump's own former allies, people who worked for him, people who were in the room, people who are now cooperating with prosecutors and telling them everything. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
This was purportedly used against members of Congress, including some Democratic members of Congress. But I think big picture, I'm curious what it says to you that Jack Smith is reaching out and proactively saying, the things you're saying about me in public are not true, and I want to come and defend myself in public.
I think it's really important. I think it's important that he's speaking up. And I think it's important that he's speaking up in a way to kind of demystify what has been grossly misrepresented to the American people by the senators in that testimony we saw a few weeks ago. As you mentioned, Casey, toll records are a very rudimentary kind of first step investigative technique in many, almost all investigations.
Mark Meadows, Trump's former chief of staff, told prosecutors that he repeatedly warned Trump he was being dishonest with the public about winning the election, that virtually all claims of significant voting fraud were without merit. That's Trump's own chief of staff saying Trump knew he lost and lied about it anyway. Pat Cipollone and Pat Philbin, former White House lawyers, testified before the grand jury. They refuted Trump's claims of widespread fraud. They confirmed they warned Trump his allegations were baseless. These aren't hostile witnesses. These aren't political enemies. These are Trump's own people, his own lawyers, his own advisors, and they're all saying the same thing. Trump knew he lost. Trump knew the fraud claims were false. Trump pushed them anyway. And then, when the legal system didn't give him what he wanted, Trump allegedly engaged in obstruction, allegedly tried to hide evidence, allegedly conspired with aides to delete security footage that had been subpoenaed. This is the kind of evidence that prosecutors dream about. Direct testimony from insiders, documents that prove intent, audio recordings that capture Trump's own words, and all of it laid out in a detailed filing that reads like a roadmap to conviction. Judge Beryl Howell made a crucial ruling that helps explain why we're seeing this evidence now. The judge ruled that attorney-client privilege did not apply for two of Trump's lawyers. Why? Because there was prima facie evidence that Trump committed criminal violations. That's legal speak for there's enough evidence to show a crime was committed. And when lawyers are being used to facilitate crimes, privilege doesn't protect those communications. So prosecutors got access to conversations between Trump and his lawyers, conversations where Trump allegedly discussed how to hide documents, how to obstruct the investigation, how to avoid complying with subpoenas. All of that is now evidence. All of that can be used against Trump and is devastating. The classified documents piece of this is particularly serious. Trump allegedly had documents about U.S. submarine capabilities, documents about nuclear warhead numbers, documents containing some of America's most sensitive national security secrets. And according to the evidence Smith presented, Trump showed these documents to people. He talked about them with people who had no clearance. He allegedly waved them around at his club. This isn't like mishandling a few emails that contain some mildly sensitive information. This is nuclear secrets. This is the kind of information that adversaries would pay millions to obtain, and Trump allegedly just showed it to whoever was around. Grand jury testimony shows that Trump and his aides conspired to delete security footage from Mar-a-Lago. This is obstruction. This is destroying evidence. The government issued a subpoena for security footage, and instead of complying, Trump and his team allegedly discussed how to delete it, how to make it disappear. They got caught because someone involved in the conspiracy cooperated with investigators and told them what happened. But the fact that Trump allegedly tried to do this, that he allegedly conspired to destroy subpoena evidence, that's a serious federal crime, and Smith has the evidence to prove it. Multiple witnesses, text messages, audio recordings, all of it showing a deliberate effort to obstruct the investigation. Trump's defense strategy up to this point has been to claim he did nothing wrong, to say he had the authority to declassify anything he wanted, to argue he was cooperating with investigators, but this evidence filing blows all of that up, because you can't claim cooperation while you're deleting subpoena security footage. You can't claim you were following the law while you're showing nuclear secrets to unauthorized people. You can't claim good faith when your own former lawyers are testifying that they warned you what you were doing was illegal. The fact that multiple former Trump allies have flipped and are cooperating with prosecutors, that's the real story here, because it creates a domino effect. Once one person flips, others start thinking about flipping. Once people see that cooperation leads to immunity or reduced charges, while loyalty leads to indictment, the calculus changes. And that's what's happening in Trump's inner circle right now. People are realizing that going down with Trump isn't worth it, that protecting him means risking their own freedom. So they're cutting deals, they're testifying, they're giving prosecutors everything they need to build an overwhelming case. And that case, based on Smith's filing, is now ready to go. The evidence is there, the witnesses are cooperating, the legal arguments have been tested. All that's left is bringing charges and going to trial. So let's break this down. Let's talk about the specific evidence Smith revealed. Let's examine what Trump's former allies are saying. Let's discuss why this evidence is being called nuclear. And let's look at what happens next now that prosecutors have built what appears to be an airtight case against Trump. Okay, so let's get into the details of what Special Counsel Jack Smith actually revealed, because this filing is extraordinary, both in scope and in damning content. The investigation has two main parts: the classified documents case and the election subversion case, and Smith's recent filing provides nuclear evidence for both. Let's start with the classified documents. After Trump left office, he took boxes of classified materials to Mar-a-Lago. The National Archives realized materials were missing and asked for them back. Trump's team eventually returned some boxes, but the archives noticed that highly classified documents were still missing, so they notified the Justice Department. The FBI investigated. They issued a subpoena for all remaining classified materials. Trump's lawyers searched and claimed they'd returned everything, but the FBI had evidence that wasn't true. So they executed a search warrant at Mar-a-Lago, and they found more than 100 additional classified documents. Some in Trump's office, some in a bathroom, some in a storage room. Documents marked top secret. Documents containing intelligence about foreign militaries. Documents about U.S. nuclear capabilities. These weren't documents that were mistakenly packed. These were materials Trump specifically requested to keep. Materials he showed to people. Materials he refused to return, even after being subpoenaed. The nuclear aspect comes from specific documents about U.S. submarine capabilities and nuclear weapon systems. According to grand jury testimony cited in Smith's filing, Trump showed these documents to people at his club, people who had no security clearance, people who had no need to know this information. He allegedly waved around a document about military plans and said things like, "This is secret information. I shouldn't be showing you this." That's consciousness of guilt. That's Trump acknowledging he knows it's wrong, while doing it anyway. And the people he showed these documents to, they've now testified to prosecutors. They've described what they saw. They've provided details that corroborate the documents investigators found. So prosecutors can prove Trump had these specific classified documents. They can prove he showed them to unauthorized people. They can prove he knew it was wrong. That's a complete case for mishandling classified information. But it gets worse, because Trump didn't just mishandle the documents, he allegedly obstructed the investigation into those documents. When the government issued a subpoena for security footage from Mar-a-Lago, Trump and his aides allegedly discussed how to avoid complying. They talked about deleting the footage, about making it unavailable, about claiming technical problems, and then the footage was deleted, or at least attempts were made to delete it before someone involved in the conspiracy got cold feet and cooperated with investigators. Smith's filing includes testimony from the person who was told to delete the footage. This person describes meetings where Trump and his top aides discussed the subpoena, where they strategized about how to avoid handing over footage that would show people moving boxes of documents, where they explicitly talked about deletion, and then this person describes being asked to actually delete the footage. And here's where it gets interesting. This person, instead of deleting the footage, kept it and eventually turned it over to investigators, along with testimony about the whole scheme. That's devastating for Trump because it's direct evidence of obstruction. It's not inference or circumstantial. It's someone saying, I was told to delete subpoenaed evidence. Here's who told me. Here's when they told me. Here's what they said. And oh, by the way, I have recordings and texts that prove all of this. That's the kind of evidence that leads to slam dunk convictions. Now let's talk about the election subversion case. This is the effort to overturn the 2020 election results. Smith's filing lays out a detailed timeline of what Trump did after losing the election. Trump was told by multiple advisors that he lost. His campaign lawyers told him there was no evidence of widespread fraud. His attorney general investigated claims and found nothing. His cybersecurity officials said it was the most secure election in history. Everyone was telling Trump the same thing. You lost. The fraud claims are baseless. Accept the results and move on. But Trump didn't accept it. According to the evidence Smith presented, Trump knew he lost, but decided to claim fraud anyway. He pressured state officials to find votes or overturn results. He pushed the Justice Department to declare the election corrupt, even though they found no evidence of that. He organized fake electors in multiple states to submit fraudulent electoral college certificates. He pressured Vice President Pence to reject legitimate electoral votes. And when all of that failed, when Pence refused and Congress was certifying the results, Trump allegedly encouraged the January 6th rally, knowing it could turn violent. The evidence for all of this is overwhelming. Smith has text messages between Trump's aides discussing the fake elector scheme. Smith has testimony from state officials describing the pressure Trump put on them. Smith has recordings of Trump's phone calls with election officials. Smith has testimony from Justice Department officials about Trump's demands. And most importantly, Smith has testimony from Trump's own former White House lawyers saying they told Trump this was all illegal and he did it anyway. Pat Cipollone, Trump's White House counsel, testified to the grand jury. He described multiple conversations where he told Trump that the schemes being proposed were unlawful, that pressuring state officials was illegal, that the fake elector plan was fraudulent, that refusing to accept the election results was unconstitutional. And Trump's response, according to Cipollone's testimony, was essentially, I don't care, we're doing it anyway. Pat Philbin, another White House lawyer, gave similar testimony. He described being in meetings where illegal plans were discussed. He described warning Trump and his team about the legal risks. He described being ignored, and now both of these lawyers are cooperating witnesses against Trump. Their testimony destroys Trump's potential defense that he was just following legal advice because his actual lawyers were telling him not to do these things. They were warning him it was illegal, and he did it anyway. That's criminal intent. That's knowing violation of law. Mark Meadows' testimony is particularly damaging because as chief of staff, Meadows was in almost every important meeting. He heard almost every conversation. He knew what Trump knew and when Trump knew it. And according to Smith's filing, Meadows testified that he repeatedly warned Trump about being dishonest with the public, that Trump knew the fraud claims were baseless, that virtually all allegations of significant fraud were without merit. This isn't some low-level aide speculating about what Trump might have known. This is the chief of staff saying Trump definitely knew the election wasn't stolen and lied about it anyway. Why would Trump do that? Why would he push claims he knew were false? Smith's filing suggests Trump did it because he couldn't accept losing. His ego wouldn't allow it. And he believed that if he created enough chaos, if he pressured enough people, if he used his power aggressively enough, he could stay in office despite losing the election. That's an attempted coup. That's trying to overturn legitimate election results through pressure and fraud and ultimately violence. And Smith has the evidence to prove it. The judge's ruling on attorney-client privilege is crucial to understanding how Smith got some of this evidence. Normally, conversations between a lawyer and client are privileged. Prosecutors can't access them. But there's an exception called the crime fraud exception. If a lawyer is being used to facilitate a crime, the privilege doesn't apply. Judge Howell found that Trump was using his lawyers to help commit crimes, specifically to help obstruct the documents investigation and to help execute the fake elector scheme. So the judge ordered Trump's lawyers to testify about those conversations, and that testimony has now become evidence against Trump. This is unusual. Courts don't lightly break attorney-client privilege, but when the evidence shows the lawyer-client relationship was being used to commit crimes, courts will intervene, and that's what happened here. The judge looked at the evidence and said, yes, there's enough here to show crimes were being committed with the lawyer's knowledge and sometimes participation, so privilege doesn't protect those communications. Trump's legal strategy has been to delay these cases as long as possible, to appeal every ruling, to fight every subpoena, to use every procedural tool available to slow things down. And that strategy worked for a while. It took years for these investigations to reach the point where charges could be brought, but now we're at that point. Smith has the evidence, he's got cooperating witnesses, he's got documents, he's got recordings, he's got testimony that destroys Trump's defenses, and the time for delay is running out. Smith's filing was strategic. By laying out all this evidence publicly, Smith is making it clear that this isn't a weak case. This isn't prosecutors reaching or overcharging. This is an overwhelming case with multiple sources of evidence, all pointing in the same direction. Trump committed serious federal crimes. He obstructed justice. He mishandled classified information. He tried to overturn an election, and prosecutors can prove all of it beyond a reasonable doubt. All right, let's break this down into the core points. Point 1. The evidence of classified document mishandling is overwhelming and includes nuclear secrets. This isn't a he said, she said situation. Prosecutors have the actual documents Trump took. They have testimony from people Trump showed those documents to. They have recordings of Trump acknowledging the documents were classified and he shouldn't be sharing them. They have evidence Trump refused to return the documents after being asked repeatedly. And they have evidence Trump obstructed the investigation by trying to delete security footage. That's a complete case. That covers every element prosecutors need to prove. Trump had classified documents. He wasn't authorized to have them. He shared them with unauthorized people. He refused to return them. He obstructed efforts to recover them. Each of those is a separate crime, and prosecutors can prove all of them. Point 2. Trump's own former allies testifying against him destroys his defense strategy. Trump can't claim he was following legal advice when his own lawyers are testifying they told him not to do these things. He can't claim he believed the election was stolen when his own chief of staff is testifying that Trump knew the fraud claims were false. He can't claim everything was above board when people involved in the schemes are testifying about the criminal intent behind them. This is the prosecution's dream scenario. Direct testimony from insiders, people who were in the room, people who heard Trump's actual words and saw his actual conduct, and all of them saying the same thing. Trump knew what he was doing was wrong and did it anyway. That's the kind of testimony that wins cases, that convinces juries, that leads to convictions. Point 3. The nuclear classification level of some evidence makes this unprecedented and uniquely serious. There are different levels of classified information: confidential, secret, top secret, and above top secret. There are special categories for the most sensitive materials. Nuclear weapons information falls into that highest category. It's some of the most protected information in the entire government, and Trump allegedly had documents from that category. He allegedly shared them with people. That's not just a serious crime, that's potentially treasonous conduct, because nuclear secrets are exactly the kind of information foreign adversaries most want. They would pay anything for it, they would do anything to get it, and Trump allegedly just showed it to people at his club. The national security implications are staggering. Now what happens next? Smith has laid out all this evidence. He's made clear he has an overwhelming case. The next step is indictment, formal charges against Trump and potentially others involved in these schemes. Those indictments will likely come soon, maybe within weeks. And once they come, Trump will be arrested. He'll be arraigned. He'll face trial. And based on the evidence Smith has revealed, conviction seems likely. Trump's lawyers will fight. They'll challenge the charges. They'll argue about venue and jury selection and evidentiary rulings. But the fundamental problem for Trump is that the evidence is overwhelming. Multiple witnesses all telling consistent stories. Documents that corroborate their testimony. Recordings that prove intent. Obstruction that shows consciousness of guilt. That's not a case you beat through clever lawyering. That's a case where your best hope is cutting a deal or banking on jury nullification. The political implications are massive. Trump is running for president while facing these potential charges. If he's indicted, how does that affect his campaign? His hardcore supporters won't care. They'll see it as persecution and rally around him. But swing voters and independents, they're going to be influenced by this. They're going to see the evidence Smith has laid out. They're going to hear testimony from Trump's own allies saying he committed crimes. And many of them are going to conclude they don't want to vote for someone facing federal charges for mishandling nuclear secrets and attempting a coup. The Republican Party is facing an existential crisis over this. Do they stick with Trump despite these massive legal problems? Do they try to find a new candidate? Do they wait and see how the cases play out? Every option has risks. Every choice has consequences. And the party is deeply divided about what to do. For prosecutors, this represents the culmination of years of work. They've built these cases methodically. They've flipped key witnesses. They've gathered documentary evidence. They've overcome Trump's obstruction attempts. And now they have cases that appear to be slam dunks. The question is whether the Justice Department has the courage to actually bring charges against the former president and current presidential candidate, because that's unprecedented. It's never been done before, and it will create enormous political backlash. But if they don't bring charges, if they have this evidence and don't act on it, that sends a message that powerful people are above the law, that you can mishandle nuclear secrets and try to overturn elections without consequences as long as you're sufficiently powerful. That's not a message any prosecutor wants to send. The timeline for all of this is compressed because of the election cycle. If prosecutors are going to bring charges, they need to do it soon. Because once we get too close to the election, the Justice Department generally avoids major actions that could be seen as influencing the outcome. So Smith is probably working on a tight deadline. He needs to bring indictments soon, if he's going to bring them at all. And based on the evidence he's revealed, he's clearly planning to bring them. You don't lay out this much evidence publicly unless you're preparing to charge. The evidence about obstruction is particularly important because it shows pattern. It's not just one bad decision or one mistake. It's a sustained effort over months to hide documents, delete evidence, obstruct investigations. That pattern makes it really hard for Trump to claim good faith or innocent mistake, because one mistake might be believable, but a sustained pattern of obstruction, that's criminal intent. That's someone who knows they're in trouble and is deliberately trying to hide evidence and avoid consequences. The cooperation of Trump's former lawyers is especially significant because of privilege issues. As I mentioned earlier, attorney-client communications are normally privileged, but the crime fraud exception allowed prosecutors to get testimony about communications where lawyers were being used to facilitate crimes. That testimony is devastating because it shows Trump was getting legal advice telling him not to do these things, and he was ignoring that advice. That proves he knew his conduct was unlawful. And that knowledge, that criminal intent, is one of the key elements prosecutors need to prove. Without it, Trump could argue he thought what he was doing was legal. But with testimony from his own lawyers saying they told him it was illegal, that defense evaporates. So where does this leave us? Special Counsel Smith has dropped what's being called nuclear evidence, both literally in terms of the classified nuclear documents Trump allegedly mishandled, and figuratively in terms of how devastating the evidence is. Multiple Trump allies have flipped and are cooperating. They're testifying about Trump's knowledge, intent, and conduct. They're providing the insider testimony that turns a circumstantial case into an airtight one. Prosecutors have documents, they have recordings, they have obstruction evidence, they have everything they need to bring charges and win convictions. The only question now is timing. When will charges be filed? When will Trump be arrested? When will trials begin? And can all of this happen before the election, or will Trump's delay tactics succeed in pushing everything past November? More on this as it develops, because indictments are coming. Smith didn't reveal all this evidence just for show. He revealed it because he's ready to charge. He's ready to take these cases to trial, and he's confident he can win. Trump's options are running out. His former allies have turned on him. The evidence is overwhelming. The nuclear secrets have been exposed, and the special counsel is ready to move. This is the endgame. This is what accountability looks like when prosecutors build comprehensive cases against powerful people. And we're about to see whether the legal system can actually hold a former president accountable for what appears to be serious federal crimes. The nuclear evidence has dropped, the allies have flipped, and Trump's legal future has never looked more precarious.